What kinds of other things do you consider as being in your toolbox?
You mean things as far as writing techniques?
Yeah, I mean, or specific examples from specific books, or just like general ideas, or I don't know, however specific or general you want to be. Like, what do you think are the things that you've accumulated that really, I guess, would be specific to you?
Yeah.
And your experience of being a reader and a writer and a teacher.
I guess one of the main things that I sort of has become part of my writer toolbox is the idea that the main character needs to be the mover of the narrative. And I think a real danger is that, for me especially, is just that my characters will be passive, that the world is happening to them, and I'm interested in their reactions to the world, but it's ultimately the narrative is a sequence of events that happens to the main character that might lead to some sort of shift in that character, but hasn't been affected by that character. And it was kind of a late realization for me that it's actually really important that the character shift their world. Not fix it. It's not like every character has to be Jane Goodall, but they have to interact and not be islanded and isolated by the world around them. And it becomes much more compelling as a reading experience when the character is integrated into their worlds and moves the events. And it's something I am alert to in books. It's that undefinable lack of caring about a book sometimes comes down to that when you think about it in those terms. So beautiful writing, great character, passive story is that passive story part that you might not have realized. Like, why don't I love it then? You know, like, it's not like, well, this should be great. Why isn't it great? And I think that's been one realization for me. Otherwise, I think I've really come around to goal-oriented characters, someone who wants something. So my latest proposal for Scholastic is called the Animal Rescue Agency, and it's about this debonair fox who runs this this network of international spies and agents who, when an animal is in danger, they send out the signal. When it gets to the Animal Rescue Agency, they send out their animal agents. So it's like an elephant over here, and then a beluga whale, and then they do a caper to free this animal from whatever is endangering them. It's like Ocean's 11, but with animals. And so and it's about conservation at the same time. And so in that, it's always about a goal. So it's every book in this series would be about, like, we have to free the polar bear cub, or we have to stop the new paper mill from knocking down the forest where the lynxes are living. And so you realize once you have a book in which a main character just has a goal, a capital G, like, here is the shining beacon, and the book is like, we're moving towards it. You realize how powerful it is. It's a quest narrative. And there's a reason those have been part of societies for thousands of years, is that the reader, unless the writing gets frustrating, the reader won't put down a quest. Because you have to know if it works. And often if you neglect the goal orientation of your main character, you give the reader way too many reasons to put down your book. They're like, oh yeah, it was lovely, but I didn't care. We care about goals. And I remember my first book in a writer's group, someone said, like, what does the main character want? And I remember saying, well, the main character doesn't have any wants. That's his problem. He's trying to figure out what he wants. And just this kind of like silent, looking at me from the rest of the group. I was like, that's not enough, is it? And they're like, no. But I was 24. Like, I didn't know what I wanted. Like, and having someone who had a goal felt like, oh, that's television, like, we're writing about real experience. But the goal doesn't have to be rescuing a polar bear cub. It can be saving a marriage, or making sure that the affair becomes the new marriage, or whatever that goal is, just having a character want something. We respond to wants very, very easily.
What do you think has been growing in your toolbox in terms of like your research, or your writing more about sort of conservation or biology, or these things that you might not be expert in? You're not like a biologist or a conservationist who became a novelist. You're a novelist who became sort of fascinated or obsessed or interested in these ideas. I'm curious, I guess, about if that was another sort of transition in your career, or what that was like, or what your process is with research in sort of those areas.
Yeah. So, previous to Endangered, my novels were about suburban white kids in America. And Endangered is a book about a 14-year-old Congolese girl who is surviving wartime with an orphan ape by her side. So it was a big shift for me as far as what I was writing about. And I didn't know that I was going to write about animals or conservation, or about or I was going to leave America in my work. And bonobos kind of came to me by accident, this species of great ape that kind of represents the positive sides of our nature. Like the chimps are the really violent relatives in the animal kingdom, and the bonobos are the peaceful ones that are matriarchal. And that so they became sort of emblems in my head as I was learning about these animals. And I still didn't think I was going to write a book about them. But it was only when I started reading about, through the bonobos, reading about the crisis in Congo, that 5.4 million people have died there since war broke out in the 90s, that I realized this is striking. That the two symbols of like the devil and the angel on our shoulder that share 98.7% of the DNA with people only exist in the country with the worst human conflict since World War II. So that was compelling enough intellectually that it was a hook for a book, and then I just had to find a premise. And the premise is, Sophie, the main character, soldiers come to the sanctuary gates, and they attack the sanctuary, and the safest place for her to be with this infant bonobo is on the other side of the electric fences that keep in the bonobos. So she survives wartime in the jungle of the enclosure, living with other apes instead of people. And so I felt ill-equipped to write it, but it was I spent about 6 months maybe researching, just reading as much as I could about Congo and bonobos. And then I went to a sanctuary for bonobos in DRC, and I stayed there for a few weeks. And I kind of realized things there that helped me a lot in writing the book. One is that a lot of the physical details, like Congo is not a hot country, and so in my kind of Western assumptions, I was imagining like beating sun and that like single baobab tree that you find on the cover of every book about Africa. But it was like in the mid-70s all the year round. Like the sky was overcast the whole time I was there. So it was those little details that prevented it from being just like the one story of Africa that like most people have, or that I certainly had. It like got complicated once I was there. And like a bonobo, I felt like holding one would be like holding a stuffed animal, but they're actually really dense and wiry. They have very little body fat, so it's like this little ball of wire in your lap. So that helped in the details side. But was the reason I wound up writing not one but what will be 4 books about apes, is that the bonobos and the rest of the apes don't have any embarrassment about their emotions. So when a bonobo is angry at you, you're just going to see like bared teeth and like full on anger. And in our society, like if someone's angry at you, they're going to say like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." And then you have to read into it like, "Oh, okay, you're not fine. What might I have done that got you mad?" And so we exist in all these layers of mediation that our culture has put upon us. And apes have incredibly complicated feelings, but they don't have any of the embarrassment about those feelings that people have. So it's the only place I've ever had in like unadulterated emotional experience where it wasn't reading between the lines to find affection, but it was right there. Even when a human is fully, or thinks that they are fully expressing something, it's layered. And apes are really a pure experience of that. And so I think on the page, it actually is sort of instantly compelling because you don't have dialogue with an ape. So you just have characters, because they are characters. They all have individual personalities when they're apes, proving who they are through their actions, which is one of those early first-year MFA rules, is that, like, you know, establish character through action, not dialogue. Like, don't have characters talk about what they want. Just have them prove it by what they do, which is ultimately how we analyze other people anyway. Like, words don't go nearly as far as actions, and apes are all action. So for me, it entered me into a sort of intriguing spot. And I tend to be a very thinky writer otherwise. Like, I can over-intellectualize in my books, and writing about apes worked exactly against my own disposition as far as what I like to write about. And so I think it helped me to broaden in my writing.